This podcast may contain explicit language. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
Tonight, for our 213th episode, we discuss one of the most celebrated comedies of this century, The Hangover from 2009, celebrating its 15th anniversary exactly the day that this episode will be released. We somehow partnered this up that specifically. Directed by Todd Phillips, written by John Lucas and Scott Moore, music by Christoph Beck, starring Bradley Cooper as Phil, Ed Helms as Stu, Zach Galifianakis as Alan, Justin Bartha as Doug, Heather Graham as Jade, Sasha Barisi as Tracy, Jeffrey Tambor as Sid, Ken Jeong as Mr. Chow, Rachel Harris as Melissa, Mike Tyson as himself, Mike Epps as Black Doug. I love that that's they put that in the casting list. Matt Walsh as Dr. Walsh. Real original, guys. Rob Riggle as Officer Franklin, Cleo King as Officer Garden, and Brian Callen as Eddie. Recognition for this movie? The Hangover was wide release on June 5th, 2009. On a budget of $35 million, the film would go on to gross $469.3 million worldwide and become the sixth highest grossing film in the United States in 2009. It was also the highest grossing R-rated comedy until Deadpool from 2016. Although if your mileage may vary and you don't think Deadpool is a comedy, I would challenge that, but then that makes this still the highest grossing R-rated comedy of all time. Out of all R-rated films, it is the sixth highest grossing ever in the United States, behind only The Passion of the Christ, which we just discussed a couple of months ago, Deadpool, American Sniper, It, and The Matrix Reloaded. The film was mildly popular among the critics, with some outright panning it, but it would go on to be included in the AFI's top 10 films of 2009, received numerous nominations among critics' circles and award circuits for its editing, screenplay, and for Best Comedy of the Year. The film's impact was also felt in several other places. It was reported in 2013 that as of that year, guests were still continuing to quote to Caesar's staff 2 lines from the film's check-in scene. Did Caesar live here? And do you know if the hotel is pager-friendly? As a result of the film, hangover-themed slot machines became popular at casinos throughout the Las Vegas Valley. The Caesars Palace gift shop sold tens of thousands of hangover-related souvenirs, and the Las Vegas Convention and Visitors Authority received numerous inquiries from persons interested in recreating some of the film's most wild scenes, such as those involving a tiger. The Las Vegas branch of Madame Tussauds added hangover-themed rooms recreating the hotel room and the wedding chapel, and a tie-in rooftop cocktail bar. And in 2018, Hasbro issued a parody version of their board game Clue, where players have to locate a missing friend somewhere in the city after a wild night of carousing. The film's success would spark 2 sequels in 2011 and 2013 as well, although I don't think they're nearly as good as the original. The Hangover currently holds a 79% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 73 score on Metacritic, and a 3.6 out of 5 on Letterboxd. So, as we start each week, Dad, what is your relationship to this movie?
Boy, I'm going back. This is about the 5th or 6th time I've seen it. I had to go back and start thinking about when I saw it the first time. I think I had rented it. I think that's the first time I actually saw it. I didn't see it in theaters for whatever reason. And I thought it was hilarious and well done, and the premise and how it was set was great. So
I specifically remember at some breakfast bar, some hotel breakfast bar that we were at. I think it was on our way to Miami that year, where all of us were sitting around and you brought out your New York Times on a Sunday and were astounded that this was like the #1 movie of the week, that it was doing gangbusters, that it was the highest rated R-rated comedy ever, and that this thing was like a juggernaut. And so it built up this anticipation because this was right around when I was between, I guess, my freshman and sophomore years of college. And I immediately made plans after I came back from vacation or whatever it was to go see this movie. And I went with my roommate. It is one of the funniest experiences I think I've ever had in a theater, experiencing that for the first time. But I was also high off my ass. He and I, because we went early to the, what is that, Cedar Creek Cinema in Wausau, Wisconsin, smoked a giant blunt before we went inside. And I was high off my ass, and it was one of the most entertaining, funniest things that I'd seen in my entire life. And nothing will live up to that first experience of watching this movie in theaters high off my ass.
Okay.
And thankfully, we're in a different cultural standpoint now where I can say that without really any fear of repercussion.
Well, yeah, I guess. It's still not legal in Wisconsin, though.
Yeah, but if you come down to Madison here, people are doing it out in the middle of the open and no one gives a shit. You can't walk 2 feet in this town without smelling it somewhere.
Yeah.
So then what is the movie about?
It's a mystery and a buddy film, but with a twist.
I would agree that it's a mystery film, but it's a mystery movie wrapped in a Las Vegas film covered in a comedy. Because at the heart of it, really what the film actually is intriguing about is that it's a mystery, but it keeps you involved because it feels familiar with the buddy kind of aspect of a bachelor party and the raunchiness of it, and all at the same time has just a good-humored nature about most of what's going on in there. And then you have, I would say, one of the seminal comedic performances of the last 25 years.
I can see your point. I don't know if there's really a Vegas film per se, but if there is, I guess this would be it.
No, there's a Vegas genre of film. There's definitely a Vegas genre of film.
Okay.
All right, so that leads me to this. What is your wildest bachelor party story?
Let's see. I'm trying to think of how many, or I thought about this and I was like, I think I've only been to 3 bachelor parties. Well, mine was the wildest. I had all my friends and groomsmen come down, and we were at your godfather's house. His wife and daughter stayed in town, and he hosted. And by 8:30, everybody was passed out asleep except for me, one other guy, and him. And so we watched movies. The best part of the story is, or the wildest thing was, that we went and got a bunch of adult cinema. But on a lark, I saw this photo or this film of bass fishing, okay, with underwater cameras. And I said, oh, I've got to get this. This is so bad. So I got it. So the next morning, we went over to your grandparents. Your mother was there. And I ran over and I took and put the tape of the bass fishing into the VCR and said, hey, you want to see what we were watching last night? And your mother freaks out. No, 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 no. And all of a sudden, this fish is swimming through the water. And she goes, okay, where's the nasty stuff? And everybody's just howling because they knew I was doing this just to put her up or put her on. And she fell for it. Should I say hook, line, and sinker?
I think I've only been to 2 bachelor parties, and at both of them, I was technically the officiant for both weddings. I take that back. Technically, we did my brother-in-law's bachelor party, which was during the middle of the day, and we just sat day drinking at the office, which wasn't much of a bachelor party, but I guess it had to suffice. Anyway, I think the craziest part of either of those that I was at was my buddy Ben, who has come up on multiple occasions during this program. So he's a recurring figure. It was his wedding, and we were in the Dells, the Wisconsin Dells, and we went to one of the adult entertainment venues And we all chipped in to get him what I thought was going to be some type of show with a scantily clad woman of the female persuasion. It turned into this, like,
There's a woman of the male persuasion.
why are you getting in the way of a good story?
Continue.
Anyway. Anyway, point being that it turned into this, like, I don't know, it's not quite BDSM, but she began, like, beating the shit. She began beating the shit out of him during the middle of this, like, shower sequence thing where I don't know. But eventually, a bunch of us started crowding around the stage. Not me, because I was kind of, like, semi-horrified at what was going on. I thought this would be something he'd enjoy, not something for the rest of us. Watching him get beat up by a stripper. Anyway, some of the guys ended up taking off their own belts and starting to, like, try and whip him with them. And I'm just like, what are you doing? How is this entertaining? This is supposed to be us, like, telling him this is what you're missing in life. And no, we're whipping him with our own belts. I finally stood in front of everybody and tried to, like, ward him off. And I'm like, what are you doing?
Okay. Was this
Yeah.
at Wisconsin Dolls?
No, at a place called Chubby's.
Oh, Cruisin' Chubby's. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Former criminal defense attorney. I know where at one time knew where every strip club in Wisconsin was, because somehow or another, criminal activity tends to go on there.
Having perused a few of these occasionally, I can understand why. So, the only time I was in Las Vegas was, I want to say, 2000? 2001?
You were only with us one time?
Well, I haven't been to Las Vegas since.
Okay,
I don't think you've been to Las Vegas since.
Oh, yeah, I've been there twice since.
For what reason?
Oh, once was a convention, and once we were on vacation, and we went through Las Vegas again later. So I've been to Las Vegas.
Vacation with whom? Because as far as I can remember,
Las Vegas. The first time was a convention. Then I went with you, and then we were with the kids, and we went on another vacation later on. So I know I've been in Las Vegas at least 3 times.
Okay. Well, I can understand 3 times, but I just don't know on what other vacation you would have gone on that you were in that area of the country. It's not like you're going out to California very often. But regardless, the point I was trying to make is I haven't been there since I was 10 or 11 years old and was tried to be forcibly removed by a security guard who had literally nothing else to do than to try and kick us out of the buffet because we might possibly go gamble. And we weren't 21. Well, that was the price of, what was it, like $8 steak and lobster or whatever the hell it was. Yeah. But I couldn't enjoy anything more than the $8 steak and lobster in Las Vegas and some of the things like the disappearing pirate ship at Treasure Island, or is it like a volcano scene at the Mirage or whatever? Yeah. There was not a lot of wholesome things that children can do at 10 or 11, and I have not been back. So I ask you, as someone who has at least visited as an adult, is Las Vegas actually fun?
Yes. First time I was there, it was on a convention. They sent your mother worked for Quick Trip. She had to be at her store when she was normally working at 5 o'clock in the morning. And we spent 5 or 6 days in Las Vegas, and we were out until 4 or 4:30 in the morning every night. And, that was the time we were getting up when we were home. So then we would come back and we'd sleep for about 4 hours. Then we'd get up and have some lunch, do some things, and then come back about 2 or 3 o'clock and sleep for 2 or 3 hours, and then get up and have a late dinner and go to shows and stuff. I had a ball just sitting and watching gambling. I would sit near a high stakes table with blackjack and watch people drop $1,000, buck chips into the pot like nothing. I mean, this is 1993, I believe. So not only was $1,000 worth more then than it is now, I had very little money to my name at that time, and seeing that kind of gambling was rather entertaining. But we met up with a couple or became friends with a couple, and we just had a ball doing all kinds of stuff that um, I'm going to leave in Las Vegas.
So are you ready to give some more background on the film for us? Do you have a plot summary ready?
I do. The Hangover is a raucous comedy that transforms a bachelor party into a riotous odyssey of misadventures. Directed by Todd Phillips, the film opens with four friends heading to Las Vegas for a night of celebration, only to wake up the next morning with no memory of the previous night's events. What follows is a frenetic quest to piece together their fragmented memories and locate their missing groom. The Hangover is more than just a series of outrageous gags. It is a cleverly constructed comedy that finds humor in the extremes of human behavior. While it may not delve into profound themes, it excels in delivering sheer entertainment, making it a memorable entry in the genre.
Thank you. Did you know? No effects or prosthetics were created for Stu's missing tooth. Ed Helms never had an adult incisor grow, and his fake incisor was taken out for the parts of filming where Stu's tooth is missing. Did you know? Mike Tyson originally refused to appear in the film, but he changed his mind when he found out that Todd Phillips directed Old School, which Tyson liked. Mike Tyson revealed that he appeared in the film to fund his drug habit, and that he was high on cocaine when he filmed his scenes. Tyson later said that working on the film convinced him to change his lifestyle, and in real life, he owns 7 tigers.
Wow. Okay.
Did you know? Ken Jeong's wife, Tran, was battling breast cancer and undergoing chemotherapy treatment, which was difficult for the family as Ken was shooting the film in Las Vegas. Bradley Cooper personally drove Ken to Los Angeles so he could be there for his wife. Cooper invited the couple to spend the holidays with him and his family. Ken said, "It got me through the most difficult period of my life." Tran was declared cancer-free after the film wrapped. Did you know? Amusingly, Alan is actually correct. Card counting is not illegal, and is indeed only frowned upon. Casinos are not allowed to ban suspected counters, as, per the Supreme Court ruling, they must rely on internal countermeasures to stop them instead. Did you know? Lindsay Lohan was offered the part of Jade the stripper, but turned it down. She did not like the script and thought the movie would bomb. Heather Graham was given the role instead. Lohan later admitted to regretting the decision. And with that, we will take our first break and we'll be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 214th episode, we welcome back 2 returning guests, Keith Techmeyer and Adam Vanderwerf, to discuss one of the biggest films of the 1980s for its 40th anniversary, Ghostbusters from 1984, directed by Ivan Reitman, written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, music by Elmer Bernstein, starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Sigourney Weaver, and Rick Moranis. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. All right, Dad. I told you earlier today we did not have any Ask Dana Anything questions. And I received some after I told you that.
Wow.
So, do you want the completely asinine question, or do you want the more realistic one?
Give me the asinine.
All right, this is from our friend Andrew Corns. If a deaf person goes to court, is it still a hearing?
Andrew, can you give me another name for a thesaurus? It's the same thing, yes, because a hearing has nothing to do with actual audio listening. So, yes, it's still a hearing.
Okay. Now, in all of my English editing and OCD-ness, have to read this in its full entirety as it was stated to me. What's your funnest story as a lawyer? Now, that could mean the most fun story that you've ever had, or it could mean the funniest and that he's just simply missing an eye. You can take
Okay.
that however you'd like. But might I suggest to you, one of the funniest stories that I can remember that you recounting doesn't really have anything to do with being a lawyer per se, which I think is the heart of this question, but is probably the funniest thing that ever happened in your office, and that is the story with the coffee can.
Yeah, I that is a funny story, but it has very little to do with being a lawyer. I'm going to instead tell a story about when I was a young lawyer and I was doing trial work. And
Just remember,
again,
you can use explicit language in this
yes,
program.
I know, because you did make that announcement. But I had a young African American accused of criminal damage to property, slashing tires on a car. And what apparently the allegation is that he was in the car and he was riding with a younger white woman who felt that he was getting too inappropriate or fresh. And so she jumps out of the car, and in retaliation, he supposedly slashes her tires. And, that was the end of the story. Okay. Well, I kept, because you have to go through this. And I said, well, what happened? He goes, no, he says, man, he says, that has nothing to do with it. She kind of like freaked out, but she was like going down on me the whole trip. I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, I'm driving because she's drunk off her ass. And she unzips me and pulls it out and starts chomping away. Well, I kind of had lost my thought process a bit, and I
As
kind
most
of
men
like
do.
pulled over. And I saw some cops, so I took off because I'm like, last thing I want to do is be in a car with a white woman in Beloit, Wisconsin, with cops coming by. Well, then they charged me with this, and I said, okay, so you have to just tell the jury about this. And I kept telling him, try to use the proper term, fellatio. And we'd go through his testimony. He'd go, and then she's giving me a blowjob. And I go, oh, geez, no. All right. So you have in trial what you call voir dire, which is an opportunity to question the jury to find out any biases. And you can use it to your advantage sometime to lay the groundwork of what your defense is. Anyway, so I had the jury pool and we're going to strike. And so I have to say, I said, does anybody get offended if we use more colorful language, such as blowjob? And no, people are like, no, nobody was. And I'm going through and, there's talk about here performing a blowjob while he's driving and whatever. Well, unbeknownst to me, the judge decided to invite the 6th, 7th grade classes from the Catholic high school or junior high over to watch the trial. And there were 3 nuns sitting in the front row. And of course, I'm not paying attention, but Judge Welker, who was the judge, said that he looked over when I said blowjob, and the nuns' faces went whiter than their habits. And they made a beeline out of there in a hurry. And Judge Welker used to love to tell that story every bar function that he could. That's one of the stories. Another one was my with Judge Welker, which is my client claimed that he the what girl said that she was sexually assaulted by him underage. I had my investigator interview her. She said he had no tattoos or distinguishing marks. He had a staph infection in some hip surgery, and he had this really grotesque scar, indentation in his left buttocks. So I filed a motion to allow him to drop his pants to the jury so that they could see this. So the judge is sitting there and he goes, I don't think you're going to be allowed to have your client drop his pants. If you would like, what I will do is we'll have some photos taken, and then we can publish them to the jury. In other words, we hand them out and the jury can look at them. So that's what I'm going to order. So he does. And I drive back to my office, which is about 10 blocks away. And I walk in the door and my senior partner comes down. He goes, "Did you file a fucking motion to moon?" He said, "Jim Wilker just called me and he can't stop laughing. I had to ask him to repeat the story 5 times before I understood that you filed a fucking motion to moon the jury."
Yeah, that's a decent one too.
Yeah. So those are 2 of them. But okay.
All right. Again, if you want to hear any other stories, and he's got plenty, trust me, he's been entertaining for years on some of this stuff, including the infamous divorce letter response, no. You can send your questions to greatestaltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. Find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. Or you can visit our website, ronnieduncanstudios.com/GModePodcast to submit any questions you would like through any of those. And we do respond to DMs. So thank you to our fan for submitting that question, and we appreciate it. So we left off at best performance. Who do you have down?
Zach Galifianakis.
Yeah, this is a dead number 1 with a bullet. He makes the entire movie.
Oh, I know. He is so good.
Like, he is by far, if you were to have an MVP award for The Hangover, he gets it every day of the week and thrice on Sunday.
Yeah. And if you watch any of his acting or shows or any of his stand-up, everything is that deadpan humor that's just absolutely... I mean, if you have not watched Between Two Ferns, it's available on YouTube, as we are now, I guess. It is worth the watch. When he interviews Obama and his first question, and of course these aren't scripted in advance, and he turns to him and say, "Can you tell us what it's like to be the last black president?" You just lose it, because everything after that goes downhill.
What's it like to have no vertical jump?
Yeah.
But yes, if you remove him out of this movie and just place him with an average comedian actor, I don't think this movie is nearly as funny or as celebrated as it was at the time. Most of the tickets for admission were somewhat just to see him in this role. All right, so then best secondary performance, who do you got?
Todd Phillips. I just thought he did an excellent job of pacing. There really isn't a slow point in the film. It moves along quickly. The humor is interspersed just right. The scenes are shot well. There's continuity in between the scenes. It's not like there's something just jumps from one place to the other without some context. So overall, I just think that lays at the feet of the director, and so I went with Todd Phillips.
I went in a similar direction, but I went with the writers, John Lucas and Scott Moore. I think that one of the better parts of the movie is the script itself, and whether or not all the jokes for Galifianakis were actually scripted. Just the idea of kind of taking 2 genres as a mashup, taking the Bachelor comedy or frat humor, and then combining it with this kind of mysterious thing in the middle of the movie, I thought was somewhat ingenious. And I think because it felt different and fresh, which unfortunately has been kind of soured by the fact that we had 2 more of them, which were not. To me, that's probably the mark of what I think about most with this film, is just in its originality of that idea. So most charismatic, this is the first evidence I think we have of Bradley Cooper being a movie star. This is before just about everything else that he did of major validation in his career in Hollywood. And he's playing a likable asshole. Every other role up to this point, he's just been an asshole and we can't really stand him. This is the first time where he breaks through, and you can legitimately say, oh, I kind of like that guy. I'd like to see him lead some movies. So for
Okay.
me, most charismatic, I go Bradley Cooper.
I thought about that. But I went off the beaten path. I went with Ken Jeong. He is just, you could just tell by every aspect of his brief time in this film that this guy has got star power and he's going to be able to market and make something of himself in a whole host of genre. And he has, from those reality music shows to television to other movies. He just has a personality that's bigger than the screen, and it came out big time here when he jumps out of that trunk and just starts wailing on the guys. I mean, at that point in time, I'm like, who is this guy? And wow, okay, yeah.
He is absolutely fearless in this movie to go all out, being buck naked in the back of a trunk, and kind of this really overly stereotypical Asian guy, Mr. Chow. It gets worse in the second one, where I won't spoil it, and frankly, it doesn't even need spoiling, but he's just kind of fearless in what he's trying to take on and accomplish in this movie, and in even the subsequent ones. Yeah, you got to give him a lot of credit for a guy that, is he a trained surgeon? And the only foray into acting he got was originally for Knocked Up from 2005, where he's the substitute OBGYN.
Yes, he was a physician working for Kaiser Permanente in California. And somehow they had open scripts because they wanted actual doctors to come in for Knocked Up to do the part so that they would look more doctorly. And he got the part, and he loved doing it so much, he told his wife, well, let's give up my career as a physician so that I can be a full-time doctor or actor. Okay. Seems to have worked.
Yeah, but for every one of those stories, there's probably 50 more where it doesn't.
Well, and quite frankly, though, you still have the degree and the experience. So if you leave being a doctor for 5 to 8 years and give it a try as something else, chances are pretty high you're going to get to go back to being a doctor.
I suppose. Let's move to Best Scene then. I have my 5 nominees here. So the first part of the movie where I really think it starts to pick up is, hey, not so close to my shaft, the getting measured scene. Galifianakis, bare ass hanging out the whole time.
Yeah.
Then I have the first night in Vegas, so their actual trip there. I have Waking Up, which is a memorable moment in the film. Obviously, because it's flash forward, and so you have to start filling in the blanks in between. You kind of have these 2 moments in time, and everything else has to be kind of revealed to you throughout. Then I have the first appearance of Mr. Chow that we talked about, him jumping out of the trunk. And finally, Tyson's tiger, and taking that back to Tyson's house. So, did you have any others you'd like to include?
I mean, there are other scenes that are worth mentioning, but now that encompasses the 3 categories for selection as far as I'm concerned.
So what to you is then the best scene?
Waking Up, because that's when you realize that this is not going to be a film that is a linear, raucous frat boy film. That this was going to be something different. And so to me, that makes it the best scene, because you end up questioning what took place as much as the guys are questioning it as they're waking up.
I do like that one, and I think it is, in fact, I would say it's probably one of the most indelible moments of the movie for me, other than maybe the reveal, and that would be the 2 that I would probably go with for that category. But I think because it's such a strong scene, setting out who these characters are kind of initially, I'm going to go with Getting Measured, because it's kind of the real breakout moment for Galifianakis really setting the tone of what his character is. So for me, that setup and how the movie is going to go from that point is more pivotal to kind of knowing exactly what you're getting out of this movie than the actual waking up, because there's a reason that you develop a relationship, you develop their characters before you get to the point where they're filling in the blanks. What's your favorite scene then?
Mr. Chow. As I indicated, I mean, it was so shocking when it happened, and it just got funnier and funnier as it went through, and it just continued. You were waiting when you were going to see this guy again.
Well, I think it's just from every moment that they think they're going to get Doug back, and it's a continuing theme throughout the film. You hear a thud in the trunk. You've finally gotten the car back. Oh, could that finally be Doug? And we've figured out the mystery. Only for some just erratic naked dude to pop out of a trunk and start swinging a tire iron at everybody. And you have no idea who he is or what is going on at all. It's just this complete randomness. The same thing kind of happens when we get Black Doug.
They still never explain why he was naked.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you really want that to be explained, though?
Maybe not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, I will say the first night when they're doing the shots up on the roof and the speech that Alan gives, which I'm going to have in quotes, I just think it's one of the better parts of the movie, but also the check-in. There's just a whole sequencing there that I really wanted to include, and I really love that part of the film, even before we get to the hangover portion of the film.
Sure.
And then I gave my most indelible already. What do you have?
Same scene. It's the one that I remember. Him just absolutely popping out of the trunk, and you're going, I remember watching this the first time and going, what the fuck? And this is another reason why I gave my nod to Todd Phillips, because you were as confused as to what was going on as the guys were.
Certainly. And I think it's the one scene you can point to in this movie where our comedy expert, Christine Duncan, would give this film 2 thumbs down, which means it's an all-time classic.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so with that, we will take our second break, and we will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley Rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmode podcast and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 195 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Also, you can follow each individual episode on our website as well. That has the notes for each individual episode with all our scores, category nominations, and the individual factoids for each episode of the show. Just click the link in the episode description of this episode or go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmode podcast to find that. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Fortunately, a rather long list, yes. Johnny Walker, 37, American actor, was on General Hospital, Siberia, and in the USS Indianapolis, Men of Courage. Bill Walton, 71, American Hall of Fame basketball player. Do my Bill Walton impression. Played for the Portland Trail Blazers and Boston Celtics, but he was a sportscaster for ESPN for well over 20 years. Albert S. Ruddy, 94, American film and television producer. Was involved in The Godfather, Hogan's Heroes, and $1 Million Baby. He won Oscars in 1973 and 2005.
For The Godfather and $1 Million Baby. Also, he was the creator of Hogan's Heroes.
Wow.
Which is specified in a show that I've recommended to you before, The Offer, which is on Paramount Plus.
Okay. Still one of my favorite shows of all time.
I know.
So, watched it as a kid. And I think I've watched it probably each time 150 to 200 times. Morgan Spurlock, 53, American film director. Did Supersize Me? Where in the World is Osama bin Laden? Comic-Con, Episode 4, A Fan's Hope. Daryl Hickman, 92, American actor, was in The Grapes of Wrath, Leave Her to Heaven, and Fighting Father Dunn. Richard Faranjai, 86, American actor, Serpico, Midnight Run, and Carlito's Way. Ian Gelder, 74, British actor, was in Game of Thrones, His Dark Materials, and Doctor Who. And last on the list, Richard M. Sherman, 95, American film songwriter. Mary Poppins, The Jungle Book, Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. He won the Oscar in 1965. He's also known for having written It's a Small World.
We commemorate these here with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. And now the awkward transition to Best Funniest Lines, where all of these will just be awful. Let's start with just a banger of one. Stu Price. She's got my grandmother's Holocaust ring. Alan. I didn't know they gave out rings at the Holocaust.
Alan. What if Doug's dead? I can't afford to lose someone close to me again. It hurts too much. I was so upset when my grandpa died.
How'd he
Phil,
die?
World War II.
Died in battle?
No, he was skiing in Vermont. It just happened during World War II.
Alan. Can I ask you another question? Sure. You probably get this a lot. This isn't the real Caesar's Palace, is it? What do you mean? Did Caesar live here? No, I didn't think so.
Alan, do you know if the hotel is pager friendly?
Alan, one of the side effects of roofies is memory loss. Stu, you are literally too stupid to insult. Alan, thank you.
Alan, hello, how about that ride in? I guess that's why they call it Sin City. You guys might not know this, but I consider myself a bit of a loner. I tend to think of myself as a one-man wolf pack. When my sister brought Doug home, I knew he was one of my own. And my wolf pack, it grew by one. So there were two of us in the wolf pack, and I alone, first in the pack, and then Doug joined in later. And 6 months later, when Doug introduced me to you guys, I thought, wait a second, could it be? And now I know for sure. I just added two more guys to my wolf pack. 4 of us wolves running around the desert together in Las Vegas looking for strippers and cocaine. So tonight I make a toast.
Alan, gambling? Who said anything about gambling? It's not gambling when you know you're going to win. Counting cards is a foolproof system. Stu, it's also illegal. It's not illegal. It's frowned upon, like masturbating on an airplane. I'm pretty sure that's illegal too. Yeah, maybe after 9/11 when everybody got so sensitive. Thanks a lot, Bin Laden.
Alan, it was a real pleasure meeting you. Melissa, fuck off. Alan, I'm thinking about getting my bartender's license. Melissa, suck my dick. Alan, no thank you.
Alan, I shouldn't be here. Doug, why is that, Alan? Alan, I'm not supposed to be within 200 feet of a school. Or a Chuck E. Cheese.
Sorry, but I'm going to do it in the same accent that Ken Jeong did.
Oh.
I don't know, it's kind of hard, isn't it? Should I not?
It would be very, very cringe.
Okay, I'll just do it this way. Mr. Chow, you gonna fuck me now? Alan, nobody's gonna fuck you. I'm on your side. I hate Godzilla. I hate him too. I hate him. He destroys cities. Please, this isn't your fault. I'll get you some pants.
Well, you didn't do the line I think you were going to do, but okay. Phil, you're not really wearing that, are you? Wearing what? The man purse. You actually gonna wear that, or are you guys just fucking with me? It's where I keep all my things. Get a lot of compliments on this. Plus, it's not a purse. It's called a satchel. Indiana Jones wears one. So does Joy Behar.
Sid Gardner. Remember, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. Except for herpes. That shit comes back with you.
I'm out.
That was it for me. I had to end with a herpes joke.
As you usually do. All right, it's time for the Stanley Rubric. So if you are new to the show, this is the part where we score the film based on 6 categories: legacy, impact and significance, novelty, classicness, rewatchability, and then added points from an audience score perspective using the ratings from both Google and Rotten Tomatoes for an overall out of 60. So you could reach 60 total points on these. I don't think one film has gotten anywhere within like 58 points. So this will be interesting where this will place. Legacy is up first. Legacy, we have often described, is how the film is thought of over 5 years after it was initially released. So now this film is roughly 15 years old after the release of this episode. And with that, we would take roughly the last 10 years into account. We also split this category between the considerations for the industry, so Hollywood itself, and then the audience at large. So, with that, Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I'll let you go.
So last week I introduced a couple of new, I would say, rubric scoring kind of categories for legacies for consideration. So on the industry side of things, this is not a film that's going to be taught in film school. It's not on the must-watch films of most critics and or industry practices were changed as a result of this movie. In fact, I would say this is the last really successful R-rated comedy or anything of the frat comedies of that generation. This probably killed, especially with its subsequent sequels in 2011 and 2013, any chance of this, I would say, the comedy era, the Will Ferrell, the Adam McKay, the Judd Apatow era of comedy from the 2000s. This was probably the last vestige.
Yes.
And so with that in mind, I do think that it would come down somewhere in a certain amount of respect from the industry as to what it accomplished. Again, it's kind of high up on the charts of R-rated comedies, R-rated films of all time. So there has to be a kind of begrudging respect. You also have to bring into account Bradley Cooper made his career off of these films, specifically this one. He became a much bigger star. He became a household name. He's now what I would consider an A-list star. Galifianakis went on and had a much bigger career as a result of this. I would say the only one out of the 3 primary trio of people that really has not had a great career post the Hangover movies is Ed Helms, where I've seen almost everything that he's done or put out, especially since The Office, has pretty much been a giant flop. So with that in mind, I think I have to give it about a 4 for the industry. I can't go probably too much higher. I think there's an argument to be made to even lower it from the 4 that it is, but because of the other pieces of the category, I'm gonna stay there for right now. On the audience side of things, this movie was fucking everywhere, and this will come around in my impact and significance. I think the further we get away from these movies, particularly this first one, the more this will seem to fade out, because I don't think that this has the staying power. But from what it accomplished early on, I think you did the poll of our office yesterday, our informal poll that we take of our staff meetings, and you said, what, 70 to 80% of the people knew about the film or had seen it?
Yes.
Which is a high rate for people who don't always watch a lot of movies. Central Wisconsin or rural Wisconsin is not a big film-going community. It's why our theaters look as shabby as they do at this point in time. So with that, I would have to say that because of its impact and how much it's still felt as a relevance, I mean, they're still selling Carlos t-shirts at Walmart. I have to give it a 5 on the audience, at least for right now. Again, I think this declines the further out we get from this movie originally being released. But as for where it still sits right now, I think this is a well-known movie. Most people can name who was in it. Most people can name a few of the jokes. So with that, I have a 9.
Part of my category is I'm rating legacy and impact and significance, both categories. I'm taking into account twofold, which is the artistic aspect and the entertainment aspect. And I'm trying to weigh them equal parts. And so I agree with your 4.0 for the industry based upon the reviews and the fact that there were multiple films made and all this. Okay. But I think this film has lost some of its luster because once you saw it, this isn't a film that you're going to go back to over and over again because you know the twist in the film. So I don't give it the same high level you do of a 5 for the public. I'm going to go with a 4 for the public and go with an 8 overall. I think it's fading more quickly than you think.
So with that, we will average the scores, and that it would be an 8.5 between the two of us. Impact and significance. Take everything that I said from Legacy and only add probably another half point for the industry side of things, just because in the immediate aftermath, Galifianakis was becoming a huge star. He got so many other opportunities to do stuff. Bradley Cooper becomes a bigger star. He starts getting in more stuff. He got specific A-list offers. He was in American Sniper, which is one of the few films that we mentioned is one of the giant R-rated films that had a higher box office than even The Hangover. You get 2 more sequels that are on the backing of this, and no matter how bad they were, in our opinion, they were still greenlit because they were still trying to capture lightning in a bottle from this original one. So I have a 9.5.
I'm going to go 4.5 for the industry and 4.5 for the public. Again, taking into account it was the 6th highest grossing film of the year for the public. And I would agree that the fact that the gaming industry tried to capitalize on it, the fact that they did the sequels, etc., does give it that point up. So I'm going to go with a 9.
So that would be a 9.25 average between the two of us. That takes us to novelty, which is a measure of not only the execution, but the originality of the movie itself. It can either be about redefining a particular genre, being completely fresh to a new genre, or I think we've had different manifestations of how this category has gone, so it could mean a lot of different things. Recently, I've been experimenting with trying to split this category between originality and execution for points, so 5 and 5. I would say from an originality standpoint, it feels familiar, even though it's kind of doing something a little bit novel in how the story devising is told. It still feels familiar enough, and I think that's why people went to see it, is that it's just a slight twist on a familiar story. So I would have probably about a 3 on that side of it, maybe even a 2.5. I guess I'll go with a 2.5. But the execution on it, when you're talking about Galifianakis having a really good, strong execution of his character, I thought Bradley Cooper was good. You might have gotten a little bit more out of some of the sub-characters here or there, but Ken Jeong is good in this film. Mike Tyson's even good while he's high on cocaine, apparently. The Tiger was excellent. I do think that from a cinematography, a screenwriting perspective, and some other things, I'm going to go with about a 4, because I do think this is a well-executed film. It's just maybe not the most original thing I've seen in comedies, and that's okay. So I have a 6.5.
I think you're way low. This was so fresh. That's what made this. Yeah, it's within the context. It's a mashup of 2 different genres. But it was so fresh. How they went about it, making this more of a mystery and having so many surprise twists and everything. It was completely fresh for a comedy. Most comedies you can pretty much sit down and tell if you spend about 2 minutes what the plot's going to be, and you're just looking for the jokes. This one you had no clue. There was no way you knew what was going to happen next or what was likely to be the outcome. And you had no idea where Doug was until the last portion of the film. So I'm giving it major points up on the fact that this is such a fresh look, that the non-sequence type of events here Yeah, I know it's by flashback, so it's not a true non-sequence, but the memories are non-sequential. So I'm giving it a 9 for novelty.
So that's a 7.75 average between the two of us. Classicness, I will let you lead.
Usually we start at a 7 and go up or down. There were a lot of problems that I had seen with this, with, kind of stereotypes of Asian Americans, stereotypes of drug dealers, um, stereotypes of strippers. Um, so I can't give it major points up for that reason. I'm going to give it a slight up from normal, simply because it did have a certain aspect that I can't really describe it. It showed the fun of Las Vegas, but also showed the ramifications of Las Vegas and how bad things could get very quickly. So I went with a 7.5.
We're not so far off, but I really would have a hard time thinking of anything to give this movie points up on other than that it's still somewhat funny. And that's one of the things that we try to do when it comes to comedies that we don't do for some of the other categories is, or for the other genres for that matter. When it's a comedy, is the movie still funny? I think that has a lot to do with classicness for this particular genre more than most. Because
Sure.
we're not judging dramas on how well we connect with somebody's sorrow in a particular category. So I would have a hard time on anything other than whether it still makes me laugh, which it does. But I would agree that there are a couple of things that are just a little bit cringy, a little bit grating from 15 years ago, such as 15 years ago, the use of a particular derogatory F word towards the LGBTQ community would not be met well. I understand this is a frat comedy, but given that that's one of the, I would say, seminal jokes of that scene, it's a little jarring and a little striking in this modern era when 2 years later, I think it was, we had such a sea change among what I guess the popular thought was towards the LGBTQ community. Also, I would agree that there are certain stereotypes in this one that are a little bit overplayed for comedic effect, of course. But I would say that with that, I would maybe give it a point up for being still funny, but I would take that point away for all the other small comments I'd have. So I'm at a 7.
You need help with the math?
Sure.
I believe it's 2 or 7.25.
I believe you're correct.
Okay.
Putting that great education on the line there. All right, rewatchability. So I again proposed a couple of rubric systems with rewatchability. We have been traditionally now over the last year or so been using our Kieran B test. And with that, we split this category into 2 parts, whether you would put it on of your own volition, which I think takes more importance in the streaming era, and whether you would leave it on. And I guess we had him raise this question last week over the fact that people from the non-cable era, the cord cutters, the, I don't know, what would you call them, Zoomers at this point, don't really know what the cable era is, where you'd flip on TNT or TBS and find a movie of the week on a random Saturday. That just doesn't really happen anymore. So I guess the best way that I can put it is now it seems every individual streamer is playing previews for things. And so if they have it in your primary screen of suggestions and you happen to scroll over it and you play the preview and then you just let the preview go into the actual movie and start playing, to me that would be kind of like leaving it on, or at least as close as I could possibly get to leaving it on. So with that, with this particular movie, I don't know if I've watched it in several years, and I really haven't felt the urge to go back and watch it. Even though I find it funny, I think this is one that would be on the 3 line for me. One that I would return to every few years or so. But it's not an every year thing, and it's definitely not something that I'm just going to put on when I'm sick or whatever else, even though I know the plot. It's just not that kind of movie for me. As far as leaving it on, if I stumbled across it on HBO or something else, I'd probably watch a few scenes, but there are some pieces of this movie where I'm just not as invested from scene to scene to scene. So again, that's probably about my 3 range. So I have a 6.
I'm not far off. I'm thinking I came in at the 6.5 range. And when I'm thinking about, would I turn it on? I might, but it has to have a period of time because the jokes are funny when you don't know they're coming. And if you watch this too regularly, it's just not going to be as funny. It had been probably 4 to 5 years since I'd seen it last, maybe longer. And so remembering all the jokes was much more difficult, so I enjoyed it more. So for that reason, I came in at a 6.5.
Okay, so then that would take us to a 6.25 average between the two of us. Then we add in audience score, which for Google users, we had an 87%, giving us 8.7, and an 84% among Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.4. The average between the two would be an 8.55. So to repeat the categories, we had an 8.5 for legacy, a 9.25 for impact and significance, a 7.75 for novelty, a 7.25 for classicness, a 6.25 for rewatchability, and an 8.55 for audience score, giving us a final total of 47.55. And that would place it currently on our list, tied with, get this, Vertigo and The Bridge on the River Kwai.
Wow. Okay.
I could just hear the film bros' heads explode, particularly our friend from last week, Karen B.
Yeah. Yeah.
It'd be like the end of Raiders of the Lost Ark right now.
Yeah.
The Hangover is on the same greatness scale as The Bridge on the River Kwai and Vertigo, that less than 10 years ago, or I guess just over 10 years ago, was the #1 film on the Sight and Sound poll. Yeah. But that's why we trust the rubric.
Yes, and you know why? Because the rubric takes into account general audience perceptions and not all the cinemaphiles.
Correct. And this is a chance for me to kind of rectify last week. I think I went on a very long 5-minute diatribe on Kieran's question of what the difference was between best and greatest. And in thinking about it during the edit for last week, I thought I came up with a more simplistic version of how to equate it. If we just want to measure what the best of anything is, we measure it by its quality. We could look at cinematography, at acting, at writing, at direction, etc., all the parts that make up a film. But then you're going to come to much of the same trotted out conclusions that we've had before, which is Casablanca, Citizen Kane, The Godfather, etc., 2001: A Space Odyssey. All of those are going to be among the best films ever made. But what we're trying to account for is all the peripheral perceptions, the audience perspective, not just the industry perspective, but the audience as well. So we kind of have the critic's perspective, but how many people that are just, as I put it last week, normal people or normies that are going to go out and watch Citizen Kane? It's just not going to happen. Movies that are more impactful for them are going to be The Hangover or Ghostbusters that we're doing next week. It's just one of those things where I think you have to balance between what a quality film is and what's accepted by the industry, as well as what the general opinion of people that maybe watch 12 movies in a year are.
It goes to it's the same basic basic takes into account the same things like music. You know, there's going to be people who say that only classical music is great music, everything else fails. But you have to take into account popular perceptions and tastes into it and what people in general like, because ultimately that's what's going to tend to be successful. What good is it to have a film that is like really great and artsy that no one has ever seen because no one else would watch it except the critics who were paid to watch it?
Well, and I don't want to decry those films. I
No.
enjoy some of that stuff, and I think there are great discussions to be had. Art is not necessarily, though, pigeonholed to one thing or the other. And just because something's popular does not mean it doesn't have value either. And I think we dismiss too often films that are seen as more popular than films that are more critically quality. And I guess the dichotomy would be something between the difference of, Star Wars versus 2001: A Space Odyssey. One is obviously a very quality film that objectively is one of the best quality films ever made. And for my money, I think 2001 is actually a much better looking film in this day and age than the original Star Wars is. Although by the time we get to The Empire Strikes Back, I would say that difference declines significantly. The advance in computer graphics and set design and things like that made up for a lot of the differences between the two. But even that being said, one is one of the most popular films that has ever been seen, and the other one is watched by college kids when they're on a psychedelic trip. Does one have more value than the other? No, but can we objectively measure them when they're trying to accomplish different things? So our system tries to set up and even the playing field between those that are popular and those that are quote unquote quality, and figure out where in between those is this conversation where I think there are more popular films that rise up our rankings of the greatest, but part of that is by design. We've given a lot of weight to the audience at large in legacy, in impact and significance, and in audience score to really give us a more rounded view of what greatness in a film actually is.
Yeah, because greatness is also measured in part on its impact on society and how it's changed people's perception of reality, of life, of humor, of everyday existence. And that has to be factored into there. And you can't do that just with a plain artistic assessment. You know, and I look back on this, my dad used to read when I was a kid before bed, and he would read Raymond Chandler and Mickey Spillane novels. Well, at the time, back in the late 60s, early 70s, these were considered really low class writings. Now, Raymond Chandler is considered classical, and his stock as a writer has risen tremendously. Just because something's popular does not mean that it's not of quality. And it's taken generations for people to come to that realization.
I think the two primary examples we've often brung up on the show are Christopher Nolan and Alfred Hitchcock. Now, Nolan obviously has gotten his recognition with the Best Director win this last year for doing a film that I think we collectively agreed was one of the best films that we'd seen in a while. But, Hitchcock never quite got his respect in the same way. But after his death, as we've let the decades pass, his films seem to be the ones that have aged the best, the ones that people still like, still return to, are still making an impact on modern culture yet. And I just don't think we have too many other examples where somebody from that era has held up in such high regard by both film people and the public. We all like different things, but this is a measure of what we consider greatness. And so I guess in this capacity, the Bridge on the River Kwai and Vertigo and The Hangover, they can all be in the same conversation.
Yeah. And if you don't like it, email us.
Or harass us on Twitter, apparently.
Yes, that's fine too.
Remaining questions for this one. What happened to Alan Satchel?
Well, Alan Satchel ended up with Mr. Chow because he put his chips in his satchel. And when he got in, he didn't have his satchel. His satchel ended up going with the guys, and ultimately, they ended up with the 80,000 in chips stuck in the groom's pockets.
Yes. So then Mr. Chow has both satchels?
No, he has his satchel, or he has Alan's satchel. Alan somehow had Mr.
He
Chow's
also
satchel.
took the other satchel.
I'm not sure that's the case. I think they brought Mr. Chow's satchel back and ended up probably taking the chips out of it and throwing the satchel.
No, the other satchel was featured. It was shown in the scene where they first actually realize who Mr. Chow is.
I'll have to go back and look, but I don't think so. But, all right.
I think you're advocating that he has both satchels. At which point, that's kind of unfair.
I don't know. They ended up with $80,000.
Okay, but split 4 ways.
I'll take it.
All right.
Somebody wants to hand me $20,000 today? Yeah, I'll be glad to take it.
Why was the tiger docile when they were stealing it, but aggressive once it was actually in the bathroom? I mean,
Well,
Bradley Cooper is literally trying to fuck the tiger in the ass as we're putting it in the car, but for whatever reason, it's not going to claw his fucking face off.
it's the pheromones from Mike Tyson in the area.
Okay. Any remaining questions for you?
They either really staged it well, or Mike Tyson really laid out Galifianakis when he punched him, because that looked pretty real. And I mean, even at this point, even though Tyson's not nearly fight shape, what the hell would it feel like to get hit like that by Mike Tyson?
I certainly hope Jake Paul finds out very soon.
Okay.
I think that was one of the dumbest mistakes he's going to ever make.
Yeah. Okay. I forgot about that. When is that supposed to be coming up?
I have no idea. I just want to see the clips of Jake Paul getting his ass pummeled. I only wish it was UFC so he could continue beating his face in on the ground. I hate Jake Paul.
Is this going to be on a pay-per-view?
I think so, yeah.
Ooh.
Don't bother spending the money. It's useless. That fight will be over in 30 seconds.
Yeah, but it would be such a great 30 seconds. I have to think about it.
It will live in perpetuity on the internet.
Sure.
Just saying, I don't have to waste my time with that.
Okay.
Remaining thoughts for the week?
No, I really don't. I haven't been able to get to a theater lately because of scheduling and holidays, and I haven't had a chance to sit down and watch anything new or fresh. So, no, I don't have anything.
Okay. I don't really have a whole lot to say other than the gross format of the show is going to be adjusting, more or less. As of this recording, the next 12 episodes that we're going to be doing, or I guess 11, currently have at least one guest, and most of them have 2. So we're going to be invaded very, very soon. I know we've been doing a lot of the 2 of us so far this season. That will not really be that will not really be the case going forward for the rest of the season. So if you're just used to the 2 of us by ourselves bantering, well, this will be a slightly different show from that going forward. We have some returning guest favorites that are part of our 5 Timers Club already, and we have many other people that are just going to be new. We have a whole slew of different people planned for you upcoming, obviously starting next week with my brother-in-law and your associate. And I do think that the humor levels on all 4 of us will match. Unfortunately, that means we all have to watch Ghostbusters. That's going to be such a hard chore.
Yeah, I know.
So, but that will do it for us this week. Thank you for listening. Ray, when someone asks you if you're a god, you say yes. Next week for our 214th episode, we welcome back two returning guests, Keith Techmeyer and Adam Vanderwerf, to discuss one of the biggest films of the 1980s for its 40th anniversary, Ghostbusters from 1984, directed by Ivan Reitman, written by Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis, music by Elmer Bernstein, starring Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd, Harold Ramis, Sigourney Weaver, and Rick Moranis. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at thenewRonnieDuncanStudios.com or at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, X, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GMODPodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our technical provider and distributor is Captivate FM.